The experts are coming out of the woodworks to predict everything from who's going to be in and win the Super Bowl to certainly the financial markets. And as human beings, you know, it's very natural. It's even entertaining and fun. And in fact, science tells us that it's wired into our DNA to make predictions. Recent research in neuroscience has laid aside the idea that we take in data from our five senses and use that to make our decisions in life. Rather, the brain is working all day long, making millions of predictions that it then compares against reality to make adjustments and figure out what to do next. Now, this is interesting in the science field, but it has real implications as far as the investing world. For one, it explains why pundits are so apt to make predictions about everything. It also sells ads, by the way, very well, so that's a side benefit. But secondly, as individual investors, we have to guard against what we call recency bias. So we're taking these predictions and assuming that whatever has been happening in the recent past, whether it's good or bad, we'll extrapolate that, and our brain thinks that's going to keep on going into the future. And if we make decisions based on that, sometimes we can get into real trouble financially. Now, let's look at a few examples of predictions made throughout history that didn't turn out so well. There's many of them. So early last year, we know that Russia invaded Ukraine. And from an economic standpoint, one of the first predictions made was that the prices of oil and gas and other petroleum products, as well as the price of wheat, which is a major export for Ukraine, but the prices of those would go through the roof. It seems very natural and plausible and almost destined to happen. They did spike for just a time, but in fact, if you look now, the price of those commodities is lower than it was before the invasion. And that could be due to several things, probably a warmer than expected winter and fall period in Europe, also an increased supply of those commodities. But the point is, the prediction that seemed obvious didn't come true. So the next couple of predictions I'll share are due to what I call the curse of the magazine cover. Whenever something becomes so widely popular in the public that it hits the cover of the magazines, you can bet that it's usually already priced into markets if it has, economic benefit. So this first one talks about technology stocks. Nick talked about them being the darlings of Wall Street for so long. Their prices have just gone through the roof. Well, back in August of 21, this cover proclaimed the unstoppable rise of the tech stocks, which is humorous unless you're really invested heavily in them, because the next year we saw that what I call the tech wreck in 2022. Unfortunately, the market caps of a lot of these stocks were just really decimated. This next magazine cover shows a fellow that's not as widely known to everyone, although unfortunately he's becoming more widely known. Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of the cryptocurrency trading firm platform called FTX. This cover asked whether he was the next Warren Buffett, and this was just shortly before he was arrested and his firm was accused of perpetrating perhaps one of the largest frauds in U.S. history. So I feel like he's probably not going to be remembered as the next Warren Buffett. This next one, back in 2019, a magazine asked if we are witnessing the death of inflation. It felt like it for many years. Inflation was very low, even dipping negative. Interest rates very, very low. And then lo and behold, last year we experienced headlines that say we're having the highest prices we've seen in 40 years. I'll give them credit. It took a couple of years, so it looked like inflation maybe was dead for a couple of years until it wasn't. Now we're seeing these higher prices. Finally, one of the most probably famous magazine covers that cost many investors countless millions, if not billions, if they acted on it, which was the 1979 cover of Business Week that declared the death of equities. And this was just on the eve of the beginning of the longest and strongest bull market in U.S. history, covering the majority of the 80s and the 90s. Successful investing often requires counterintuitive action. If everyone agrees on everything, then it's probably priced into the markets already, because the markets are pretty efficient most of the time. Now, some of these pundits will get their predictions right some of the time, but very few, if any, throughout history have been able to do it consistently enough that it's worthy of taking action on their predictions. while it can be entertaining and even fun to listen to the predictions, and it's certainly wired into our human nature, our advice is to turn off the pundits, ignore the majority of the predictions being made about the markets and the economy, and focus on the things that you can control.